The wrong place at the wrong time is how today's case is being described. Time and time again I see the phrase being used even on some of the cases that I've personally covered. But when we look at cases that have been labelled as such, the victim normally has nothing to do with it. It's rarely a previous perpetrator of a crime or someone who has slighted a foe. Running with this reoccurring theme then, today's case is exactly that. A young man who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and hadn't a robbery happened only a few hours prior to him being caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time, that young man would be here with us today. Shortly after 12:50 PM on the 4th of July 2020, 35-year-old Demetrios Kyriacou had been approached by 4 men unknown to him on Carville Street within the Finsbury Park area of North London. They were there to rob him. It's unclear why they targeted Demetrios, but his Rolex watch, cash, 2 Nokia phones and an iPhone were stolen. Although Demetrios wasn't seriously injured during the robbery, he did walk away with some head injuries. The group of 4 then ran towards a black BMW and fled the scene. Demetrios stumbled towards his blue Range Rover, and soon after the police arrived at the scene. However, I don't believe it was Demetrios who called them. They questioned him as to what happened. He said he was robbed by 4 unknown individuals and that they had a knife, but told them he didn't wish to speak further about it. He wanted the matter forgotten about. Well, at least that's what he told the police. In reality, he was about to take the law into his own hands. Over the next 2 hours, arrangements had been made for Darren Dredge and Nathaniel Rees to meet at Matthew Hardy's home address on the 6 acres estate in Islington, North London. Demetrios had been living there at the time. The 4 men discussed the robbery and were trying to figure out who had attacked Demetrios. It was then one of the men suggested that they use the Find My iPhone app to track the phone down, and there it was, roughly 1.5 miles away within the Roman Way area. As soon as the phone was tracked, all 4 men got into their separate vehicles, began driving towards the area and encircled it. Demetrios and Nathaniel had been in Demetrios's blue Range Rover by themselves. They took a detour to an unnamed location to pick up a firearm. The pair arrived in the area at around 3:20 PM, roughly 2.5 hours after the initial robbery took place. As they approached Faraday Close, they went down an alleyway where a group of people were, along with the stolen property. Seconds later, Nathaniel shot towards the group and hit 22-year-old Imani Alaway Munir multiple times on Roman Way. The pair ran back to the Range Rover and fled. Meanwhile, Imani had been bleeding out on the floor. Paramedics from the London Ambulance Service along with London's Air Ambulance attended and found him on the floor unconscious but breathing. However, despite the best efforts of emergency services, he was pronounced dead roughly 30 minutes after the shooting. He'd been shot 4 times across the body. The first shot to the buttock proved fatal. So a homicide investigation was opened by the Metropolitan Police, and they discovered that although Imani had been shot 4 times, 14 bullet casings were found at the scene. Along with the bullet casings came that CCTV that you've already seen. 14 shots were heard on that too. Police came to the conclusion then that 14 shots in total had been fired. That stolen property was also found at the scene, along with the black BMW used by the suspects in the earlier robbery. But as the investigation developed, it was established that Imani was completely innocent. He hadn't taken part in the robbery. In fact, he arrived at the location just moments before the gunman. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Eventually though, 8 men were charged in connection with the investigation, including the 4 men we've spoke about already, along with a 5th person named James Nicholson. It's been said that he collected the gun and disposed of it. To this day, it hasn't been recovered by police. So all 8 men would go on trial in connection with the murder. It was huge, it lasted 11 weeks. In the end, 3 of the 8 were found not guilty on all charges. Nathaniel Rees pleaded guilty to murder on the second day of the trial, whilst Demetrios was found guilty. James Nicholson, Matthew Hardy and Darren Dredge were all found not guilty on murder charges, but were found guilty on manslaughter charges. All 5 men are to be sentenced at a later date. I think what makes this case all the worst is that it took place in front of several witnesses, some of them children. It happened just in front of a children's playground in broad daylight. Over 2020 and early 2021, when I was covering a lot of breaking news within London, we started to see a trend of violent crime taking place in front of such places, and we spoke about the impact that this would have on children. Put yourself in the role of a parent. How scary must it be that your child could potentially witness a man being shot dead right in front of your eyes? But again, another incident in where a civilian, Imani, has been caught in the middle of an ongoing issue that had nothing to do with him. He was just going about his business in the local area, and then because of something someone else did, he's had to pay for it with his life. All this taking place within the space of a few hours. Literally not even 3 hours after that robbery took place, Imani's life was taken.